I never thought my own pool would become the battleground for a neighborhood war. It started with small things, a missing pool float here, wet footprints there, until one morning I woke up to see people from the HOA relaxing in my backyard, sipping drinks like they owned the place. They didn't ask, they didn't care. They just decided my home's pool was community property. That's when I stopped being polite and started planning something they would never forget. So tell me, what would you do if your own HOA treated your backyard like it was theirs? For 5 years, my backyard had been my personal escape, a quiet corner of the world where I could shut off from work, breathe in the stillness, and just listen to the sound of water rippling in the pool I built with my own hands. Every detail was mine. The stone tiles, the soft lights that glowed at night, even the small fountain that my daughter loved to sit beside. When I bought the house, I thought I'd found peace. The neighborhood looked perfect, manicured lawns, friendly smiles, and an HOA that promised to keep the community beautiful. It sounded comforting back then, like a guarantee of order. Everyone waved, everyone followed the rules, and for a while, I believed I'd made the right choice. But there's something about perfect places. Sometimes they're just a little too perfect. The HOA board was always around, inspecting, reminding us about mailbox heights and lawn edges. It seemed harmless, almost amusing at first. I didn't mind the occasional notice about my hedges being too natural. I even laughed when they suggested I repaint my fence a more approved shade of beige. Then summer came. And with summer came the sound of splashing. Not mine, not my daughter's. It started as faint laughter, just beyond the hedges, like someone enjoying my pool while I wasn't looking. I brushed it off the first time, thinking it was just the neighbors next door. But the next morning, there were wet footprints leading from my gate to the patio. That's when I noticed the latch on my pool gate had been loosened, not broken, just tampered with. I mentioned it to one of the HOA members during their next friendly inspection. She smiled in that way people do when they know more than they're saying. "Oh," she said lightly, "the HOA loves that you keep your pool so clean. It really adds to the neighborhood's image." That's when the peace I'd built in my backyard started to crack. At first, I thought it was a misunderstanding, but as the days went by and the laughter returned, louder, bolder, coming from people I'd never met, I realized something I never expected. The HOA wasn't protecting my property, they were using it. The next week, I decided to test a theory. I left for work a little earlier than usual, but parked a few streets away, hidden behind a row of trees. From there, I had a clear view of my backyard. And there they were, 3 people, all wearing those HOA polo shirts, setting up folding chairs by my pool. One of them dipped their feet in the water. Another opened a cooler, laughing like they were on vacation. It didn't make sense. My gate was locked. I checked it twice the night before. But now, the latch hung open again. I wanted to storm in, yell, demand answers, but instead, I watched. I wanted proof, and deep down, I wanted to understand why. When I finally confronted the HOA president at the next community meeting, she didn't even deny it. She just smiled that perfect, tight-lipped HOA smile and said, "We maintain the neighborhood image, and your pool is a shared visual amenity. It's part of the community aesthetic." Community aesthetic? That was her excuse for trespassing? I felt something burn in my chest. That slow, helpless anger that comes when someone steals from you but calls it a favor. Over the next few days, things got worse. Notices started showing up in my mailbox. Fence color out of compliance. Patio furniture not uniform. Unauthorized landscaping changes. It was petty, obvious. Each letter signed by the HOA board, the same people who had been using my pool like their personal resort. I tried to fight back politely at first. I filed complaints, sent emails, even called the city to confirm property lines. Everything on paper was mine. The HOA had no right to use or enter my property without permission. But the HOA didn't care about paper. They cared about control. Soon, my infractions came with fines. Small ones at first, $50 here, $100 there, then larger. The message was clear: stay quiet or we'll make your life miserable. And they did. The sprinklers in my front yard stopped working one morning, the control box tampered with. A few days later, someone dumped pool chemicals all over my lawn, burning the grass into yellow patches. When I complained, the HOA sent me another violation letter for unsightly lawn damage. It was like they were daring me to break. I started to feel like a prisoner in my own home, constantly watching, waiting, wondering what they'd do next. Then, one Saturday afternoon, I caught them again. Not just a few people this time, almost the entire HOA board lounging by the pool. They'd brought their families, kids were splashing, adults were sipping drinks, even music played from a Bluetooth speaker. When I stepped outside, everything stopped. All eyes turned to me. "Is there a problem?" the president asked, sunglasses hiding her eyes. "Yes," I said, "this is my property." She didn't flinch. "Technically," she said, "you agreed to share exterior spaces when you signed the HOA contract. The pool contributes to the neighborhood's visual harmony." Visual harmony. That was her excuse for trespassing? I stared at her. "You mean your private pool day?" She just smiled. "You're welcome to join." That was the moment I realized they weren't going to stop. They believed the HOA made them untouchable. But I also realized something else. If they could play dirty, so could I. So I started planning. Quietly. Carefully. I installed new motion sensors and cameras disguised as garden lights. I changed the pool gate latch to a magnetic lock coded only to my phone, and I made sure the security footage uploaded automatically to the cloud. Then came the next weekend. Another sunny day, another round of laughter coming from my backyard. The HOA was back. Except this time, they wouldn't leave smiling. I walked around the side of the house, pretending to check the mail, and watched from behind the hedge. They were all in the pool again, floating, splashing, sipping from their cups. I waited for just the right moment, the one where they were the most comfortable. Then I triggered the system. The pool lights flickered. A faint hum rippled through the water. I dropped a harmless but vividly colored pH test powder into the filter earlier that morning, a compound that would react instantly when chlorine levels shifted. Within seconds, the water turned a bright, glowing neon pink. Screams erupted. People scrambled out, slipping on the tiles. Someone yelled, "What's happening to the water?" Another shouted, "It's staining!" Of course, it wasn't dangerous, but it was dramatic and perfectly timed. The cameras caught everything: the shock, the panic, the HOA president dripping neon pink water all over the patio. I stepped out then, pretending to act surprised, and said, "Oh my God, I just cleaned the pool. You weren't supposed to swim today." Her expression froze. You set us up," she stammered. "Actually," I said calmly, "you trespassed. Again. And this time, I have everything on video." For the first time, she didn't have a comeback. Just silence. The kind of silence that told me I'd finally shifted the balance. But even then, I knew it wasn't over. Because the moment people like her feel embarrassed, they don't back down. They double down. And I could already see it in her eyes. This wasn't the end of the HOA's game. It was only the beginning.
For a few days after the pink pool incident, things went quiet. Too quiet. No laughter from the backyard, no surprise visitors, no new fines in my mailbox. I almost started to believe it was over, that embarrassment had finally done what logic couldn't. But then the envelope came. Plain white, no return address. Inside was a formal notice from the HOA board. You are hereby fined $3,500 for property damage to shared community amenities and for creating unsafe conditions. Shared community amenities. They were calling my private pool shared. I laughed out loud at first, that short, bitter kind of laugh that hides exhaustion. But then I saw the signatures at the bottom. Every single board member, even the president. They were serious. The next paragraph made it worse. If the fine wasn't paid within 30 days, they'd place a lien on my property. They wanted my house, my silence, my surrender. That night, I sat by the pool, the pink still faintly staining the tiles, a reminder of how far this had gone. My hands shook with anger, but underneath that was something colder. Determination. I'd tried to be reasonable. I'd played by their rules. Now, I was done playing. I opened my laptop, logged into my security system, and downloaded every video, every clip of them breaking into my yard, swimming, lounging, trespassing. Then I called a friend, an attorney who lived 2 states away, but loved a good fight. When she heard the story, she didn't even hesitate. She said they violated multiple property laws, and if you have evidence, you don't just have a defense, you have a case. For the next week, we worked quietly. Every document, every photo, every violation notice, even screenshots of the HOA's own bylaws showing that private pools were not considered community property. The evidence built up like a storm, and in the center of it all was that single moment, the pink water, the trespassing, the laughter that turned to panic. Then came the HOA's monthly meeting. Public, recorded, and open to homeowners, the perfect stage. I walked in that evening with a small folder under my arm. The room was filled, board members at the front table, residents scattered in the seats. The president smiled when she saw me. "Here to settle your fine?" she asked sweetly. "No," I said. "Here to settle something else." The room went quiet. I opened the folder and began handing out printed stills from my security footage, frame by frame proof of every trespass, faces clear, timestamps visible, each shot more incriminating than the last. "This is your HOA board using my private property without consent." Whispers rippled through the room. The president's face turned pale. She tried to laugh it off. These photos could be anything. I clicked my phone and played a short video of her stepping into the pool, drink in hand, saying, "This is so much better than the community one." The room erupted. Gasps, murmurs, even a few laughs. I wasn't done. I pulled out the fine notice, holding it up, and this is the HOA trying to fine me for damages they caused. A man from the audience, one of the quieter neighbors, stood up. "You mean they were using your pool?" "Regularly," I said, "and I have weeks of footage to prove it." The president's composure cracked. "That footage was obtained illegally," she snapped. "It's from my own security cameras, on my own property. Would you like me to play the rest?" She went silent. Another board member tried to intervene, mumbling about community misunderstanding, but by then the crowd had turned. Homeowners began shouting, not at me, but at them, demanding answers, demanding resignations. I could have stopped there, but I didn't, because they had threatened my home, my peace, my family's safety, and I wanted the truth recorded. So I looked straight into the camera that streamed every meeting to the HOA's website and said, "This is what happens when people forget that community rules don't mean community ownership. My backyard is not your playground, and the HOA doesn't own me." The next day, everything changed. By noon, the footage from the meeting had gone viral on a local Facebook group. Comments poured in from other neighborhoods, people sharing their own HOA horror stories. A local reporter even called, asking for an interview. By the end of the week, the HOA president had resigned. 2 board members followed. An emergency meeting was called to restructure leadership and review conduct violations. But even then, they tried one last move. I received an email marked urgent, a proposal to resolve the matter privately in exchange for me signing a confidentiality agreement. No lawsuit, no press, just silence. I stared at that email for a long time. For months they had trespassed, lied, fined me, and tried to intimidate me. And now, when the truth finally came out, they wanted to bury it. So I hit reply. I wrote, "I'll see you in court." 3 weeks later, we did. The case was short. The evidence was airtight. Every video clip, every violation notice, every threat, all laid out neatly before a judge who didn't need long to decide. The ruling was clear. The HOA had no authority to access or use private property, had acted in bad faith, and owed restitution for damages and emotional distress. When the decision was read, the president's face was blank. Not angry, not shocked, just empty, like she finally realized the game was over. I didn't cheer, I didn't gloat. I just walked out of that courtroom feeling lighter than I had in months. Later that evening, I came home and stood by the pool again. The water shimmered clear under the lights, calm and still. It felt different now, like I had taken something back that had been stolen from me, piece by piece. My daughter came out, holding a cup of lemonade. "Can we swim now?" she asked. "Yeah," I said quietly. "Now we can." As she splashed into the water, laughter echoing across the yard, I thought about everything the HOA had taken and everything I had gotten back. Control, peace, respect. The pink stains were gone, but the lesson wasn't. Because in neighborhoods like ours, power doesn't just come from titles or committees. It comes from the people who refuse to be bullied, the ones who stand up, document everything, and push back, no matter how small they feel. And as I watched the ripples dance under the lights, I realized something else. Sometimes the best revenge isn't loud. It's quiet. It's peace, the kind they can't fine you for, trespass on, or steal again. But even as I thought that, a faint sound drifted over the fence. Voices from the street, neighbors whispering, cameras flashing, the echo of my own story spreading beyond this little community. Maybe this was more than just my victory. Maybe it was the start of something bigger. Because if there's one thing I learned through all this, you can paint the fences beige, measure the grass, and quote the rules, but you can't control the people who finally had enough. In the weeks after the court ruling, life slowly began to return to normal. The pool was quiet again. No uninvited laughter, no wet footprints, no shadows slipping through the gate when I wasn't looking. For the first time in months, the only ripples on the water came from the breeze, not from people who thought they owned it. But peace felt different now. It wasn't something I took for granted anymore. It was something I had earned. The HOA, once so confident and untouchable, began to crumble from the inside. The president's resignation left a power vacuum, and for a while, nobody wanted to fill it. The community meetings that used to feel like court hearings suddenly turned into open discussions. Neighbors who'd once stayed silent began to speak up, not just about my situation, but about everything they'd been too afraid to mention. I wasn't the only one they'd pushed around. People started sharing stories. The retiree who got fined because his wind chimes were too colorful. The single mother who was threatened with legal action over a small vegetable garden. Even the quiet couple down the street who received a violation for leaving their trash can visible for more than 10 minutes after pickup. The HOA had ruled with intimidation, but now that curtain was gone, and once people saw behind it, they couldn't unsee it. At the next election, nearly the entire board was replaced. For the first time, residents voted for people who actually lived like neighbors, not overseers. The bylaws were rewritten. Community cooperation replaced mandatory compliance. The word fine appeared only once in a section about transparency and homeowner consent. I didn't run for the board. I didn't want power. I just wanted peace. But when they asked me to attend the first new meeting as a guest, I agreed. It was surreal, sitting in that same room, the same folding chairs, the same tables, but feeling the energy completely changed. There was no fear, no tension, just people, tired of fighting, trying to make their home better together. When they thanked me for standing up, I didn't know what to say. I wasn't trying to be a hero. I was just someone who'd had enough. But maybe that's what it takes sometimes, one person to say no loud enough that others realize they can too. A few weeks later, I got a letter in the mail. Not a fine, not a threat, but a thank you card. It was from the same neighbor who once whispered at meetings, too scared to challenge the board. Inside, in shaky handwriting, she wrote, "Because you fought back, I planted my garden again. Thank you." It hit me harder than I expected, because in all the chaos, the pink pool, the courtroom, the shouting, I'd almost forgotten why I fought in the first place. It wasn't just about boundaries or property lines. It was about ownership, not ownership of a pool, but of peace, of choice, of freedom inside your own home. The local newspaper ran a small story about the case, nothing flashy, just a headline that read, "Homeowner wins against HOA overreach, sparks change in community." But that small headline traveled. Emails came in from people across the state, some even from other countries, telling me their own HOA horror stories. Strangers thanking me for proving that homeowners could push back and win. Somewhere in all that noise, something shifted inside me. For the first time in a long time, I felt proud. Not angry, not defensive, just proud that I hadn't let them take something from me that was never theirs to begin with. Summer returned again, almost exactly a year after it all began. The water shimmered under the afternoon sun. My daughter's laughter echoed across the yard. The garden bloomed along the fence line, bright and wild, the way I liked it. And as I leaned back in the same chair where I'd once sat fuming in silence, I realized that revenge really hadn't been the victory. Peace was. But it wasn't a quiet peace. It was the kind that stands on solid ground, unafraid of the next storm. I started to notice little changes around the neighborhood, too. People who used to keep to themselves began talking over fences again. Kids played in driveways without someone complaining about noise levels. The air felt lighter. One evening, as I was cleaning up after a barbecue, a few neighbors stopped by. They didn't stay long, just long enough to say thanks again. One of them, the new HOA president, smiled and said, "We're making sure no one forgets what happened here." And I smiled back, because that was all I wanted, to not be forgotten. To make sure nobody else had to go through what I did just to feel safe in their own backyard. Months later, the pink powder incident became a bit of a neighborhood legend. Kids would whisper about it as they rode by on their bikes. Some of the older residents joked that it was the moment the HOA finally met its match. I didn't correct them.
Maybe they were right. Because looking back, that moment, ridiculous, chaotic, almost cinematic, was exactly what broke their illusion of control. It reminded everyone watching that rules don't make communities. People do. And maybe that's the real lesson buried in all of this. You can build fences, write bylaws, hold meetings, and call it order. But if you forget kindness, respect, and fairness, you're not leading a community. You're ruling over it. That night, as the sun dipped low and the pool lights flickered on, I sat quietly by the water, watching the ripples stretch out across the surface. Each one felt like a memory, a reminder of how far I'd come, from the day I found strangers in my yard to the day I found peace again. I thought about that first morning, how powerless I'd felt. And then I thought about this one, calm, strong, unafraid. Power isn't about control. It's about boundaries, knowing where yours begin and having the courage to defend them when someone crosses the line. And maybe, just maybe, that's something we all need to remember. Because in every neighborhood, in every small group where power hides behind rules and smiles, there's someone waiting for permission to fight back. They just need to see it's possible. So, if you're watching this, and you've ever felt small in the face of unfairness, or trapped by rules that were never meant to protect you, remember this: one act of courage can ripple through an entire community. It only takes one person to say, enough. And maybe that's the real shocking surprise after all. Not the pink pool, not the prank, not even the lawsuit. It's that peace can grow out of chaos. And sometimes the biggest victory isn't winning a fight. It's knowing you stood your ground when it mattered most. As I turned off the pool lights that night and watched the water fade back into stillness, I smiled. Because the fight was over. But the message wasn't.